Recording my face. So thank you all for coming back. Tanya Tuesday. And this week we're going to discuss, or I should say, continue our discussion with happiness. Last week, we started off with why happiness is important. Now, one might say happiness is important because we want to be happy in life. But of course, the Tanya is more interested in our life's mission. And therefore, the question of why we should be happy is a question of what does that have to do with our life's mission? And the answer is that in order to overcome and overpower our Yetzer Hara, our evil inclination, our animal soul, we need to be happy because you cannot win a war without being happy. You can be stronger, but if you're not happy, you're not going to win. So it's important to know how we feel, because if we don't feel good, we don't feel good about ourselves, we are going to lose the battle. As I always say, I like to say that there's a lot of discussion in psychology today about shame, how shame is so debilitating and destructive in so many different areas of people's lives. And I always like to say that when we had this discussion and when we taught the JLI class, that for the evil inclination, the sin is just a door prize. The depression and the shame is what it really wants. Because the sin is a one-time thing. If it gets you to sin, good, it got you to sin once. But if it gets you depressed about it, if it gets you feeling shame and sadness, then it's really got you. Then it really has you. So that's why it's important to understand that it's not only about what we go through and that it's not just the decisions we make, but how we react to the decisions and how we react honestly to life. And today's class is going to be about how to be happy. Okay, so sorry. So we discussed last week, we established that one has to be happy, or one should be happy in order to fulfill your godly mission. Because if you're not happy, you're not going to be able to accomplish and do the right things. You're going to be sloth, you're going to be sluggish, you're going to be listening to your animal soul. The question is, though, it's not so easy to be happy, right? And the Tanya agrees with that, and the Tanya knows that. The Tanya knows that just because I say be happy doesn't mean you will be happy. Okay, so nobody should think that Tanya ignores our feelings. That's why the Tanya is going to spend pages and pages now on how do we deal with when we are sad. I do want to point out there was this great article that came up yesterday. I'll probably post it again later in the chat. But an amazing story. It was printed in a Jewish magazine, but I found it online. And it's about someone who has some serious health issues and how he's reacted in life. So it's really a powerful story and an inspirational story. So I'm going to share that. I'm just looking for that link over here. It's a worth it read. But that is going to be our topic today. Our topic today is going to be how exactly can we be happy when there are reasons to not be happy. Now, there are spiritual reasons not to be happy, decisions we make. That's not going to be today's discussion. Today, we're going to discuss the more obvious reason people would be unhappy, and that is most people are going to be unhappy because physically things are not going well. They don't have enough money in the bank. Their health is not good. There's stress at the workplace. Children have a lot easier time being happy. They don't worry about the bank. They don't worry about, even if they get sad for a moment, they can be happy afterwards. But adults, we have a lot to worry about, and we can't just say ignore it. We have to deal with it, and so that's what we're going to discuss today. I'm just sharing here the link. Definitely a worth it read. So let's start with a story. There was one time a rabbi, a Rosh Yeshiva, head of a yeshiva, who was very wealthy. He had a big business. This is a true story. He had a big business, and his business was lumber. And the way lumber used to work is a lot of times you'd have forests, and you would ship the lumber by the rivers. You would put the lumber in the rivers, and the rivers would send all your lumber downstream till it would get to where it would need to go. So one time, unfortunately, somehow all this lumber in the rivers got destroyed. And it was a major, major financial loss. And the employees did not know how to bring up this, what happened, to their boss. And so they said, let's ask one of his yeshiva students to break it to him, come from a religious angle. So this yeshiva student approaches his rabbi and says, Rabbi, it says in the Talmud that just as someone has to make a blessing for good things, someone has to make a blessing for bad things. So the rabbi says, yes. So he says, so Rabbi, does that mean that if something good happens, you would dance? Does that mean if something bad happens, one should also dance? The rabbi says, of course. The Talmud says you gotta bless God the same exact way that you bless him for bad things, you bless him for good things. Same thing. You gotta have the same reaction. So the student turns to the rabbi and says, Rabbi, well, now's your time to dance. And the rabbi fainted. So what's the point of the story? The point of the story is that though we can know in our mind that we need to be happy even when bad things happen, and we will discuss why, we have to always remember, of course, that we are still human beings, and our reactions may not always be where we'd like them to be. We're not perfect. It's something we work on, and it's something we deal with. So, however, what we learn today will help us deal with it. And so even if when something bad happens, of course, the first natural reaction is to be sad, to be upset, to be angry, whatever it is. With the ideas that we teach today, we will learn strategies to hopefully have so to speak, a secondary reaction or temper whatever feelings that we might have. And that is what we're going to try to do today in this class. Okay, just letting someone else in. Okay, so the interesting thing, and we quoted the story of the Talmud. The Talmud says, just as we bless God for the good things, we need to bless him for the bad things. So many of you may not be familiar, but when you have good news, you're actually supposed to make a blessing. There's a blessing. We make many different blessings throughout our day. So for example, we make a blessing. There are three, I should actually say, there are actually three types of blessings. There are blessings for mitzvahs. So for example, you eat matzah, you make a blessing. You light Shabbat candles, you make a blessing. There are blessings of thanks. Okay, so you're thanking God. So when you eat food, you're thanking God. And there are blessings of God's power, God's wondrous power. So there's blessing on lightning, blessing on thunder, blessing on earthquakes, things of that nature. So the blessing of thanks. So there's only three types of blessings. Now, most people don't know when something really good happens to you, you're actually supposed to make a blessing. Or even, by the way, if you're at a meal and someone brings a really good wine, there's a blessing to be made, a special blessing, not just Bar Guffin, but a special blessing to be made for getting even better wine. Just for example, when a child is born, when you have a child that's born, you make a blessing. Now, everybody knows, or not everybody knows, but most people have experienced when a loved one passes away, we say Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. We say, blessed is the true judge. And actually, when someone that is really close to you passes away, you actually say it with God's name. Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. When a close relative of yours, you actually say it with God's name. Where does this come from? Why are we making a blessing for the true judge? So most people see it as just an acceptance of God's judgment. But if that was the case, we would not be making a blessing. We would just say, there's other ways, there's actually other prayers of accepting God's judgment. There's a prayer called Sidok Hadin. So why are we saying a blessing that someone passed away? There's only three types of blessings. And the answer is, based on this Talmud. The Talmud says, just as you bless God for the good, you bless God for the bad. Now, what does it mean, just as? It cannot mean you make the same blessing, because the Talmud itself actually gives two different blessings. Rather, what it means, as all the commentaries understand it, is we have to accept the bad just as we accept the good. Going back to our original story, just as you would be happy and you would dance when something good happens, when you bless God for the bad, you should be happy and you should dance. Now that sounds crazy. I know it does sound crazy, and it's not natural. But that is what the Talmud is saying. The Talmud is saying that we have to be thankful to God, and we have to accept the bad that comes to us and be happy with it, just as the good. And let's read the Tanya, the first couple lines, which brings to us this source. And here's by the way, here's the story that I was talking about that you can look at. But in the meantime, let me get to the right page that I want to get to. Let me get here. Okay. All right. So let's take a look here. And I don't think we need the information. Okay. So the Alter Rebbe says, now the following is a prescribed plan to free yourself from any sadness or hint about material things, even in the highly emotive areas of children, health, and livelihood. Everyone knows the teaching of the sages of our blessed memory. A person is obligated to bless God for misfortune in the same way that he blesses God for the good. And according to the Talmud, this means you should accept misfortune joyously, with the same joy that he would have for good, which is open and manifest. Meaning, again, you can read the Talmud as saying just as you bless God for the bad, for the good, you got to bless him for the bad. Means you have to make a blessing. Talmud says no. It means much more than that. It means not just you're making a blessing. It means the feelings that go along with that blessing should be the same. You should be accepting the bad with the same joyous feeling that you accept the good. So when you win the lottery, should be the same as when your house gets foreclosed. Okay? So far, that's what it's saying. The Tanya takes for granted here the reader. Okay. You know what? Before I get to the commentary, let me explain. So let's explain how is that possible. So how is that possible? How is it possible that one can experience a home foreclosure and be happy just as you won the lottery? Now, we all talk about, it's not about what happens in life, it's how you react. But I mean, how can you honestly react to something terrible the same way you react to something good? So I'll preface it with a story. And again, this is the ideal level. We're none of us, I think, are going to be there, but it gives us an idea of what we can get to. Right now, it's getting warm in here. Okay. So the story is that one time there was a follower of the Maggid of Mezrich, and he came to his teacher, the Maggid of Mezrich, and he asked him, the Talmud says you should be happy for the bad just like you're happy for the good. He said, how is it possible? So the Maggid of Mezrich told him, I want you to go to my student, Rabbi Zusha of Anapoli, who lived in the city of Anapoli. Go to my student, Rabbi Zusha, and he'll teach you. So this student traveled far away to Rabbi Zusha of Anapoli. Rabbi Zusha of Anapoli lived in abject poverty. He lived at the edge of town, in a poor house with a leaky roof, bare furniture, very little food. And so this chassid comes to Rabbi Zusha and says, Rabbi Zusha, I came from the Rebbe. The Rebbe wanted you to teach me. So Rabbi Zusha says, what did he want me to teach you? So he says, he wanted me to teach you how to be happy when bad things happen. So Rabbi Zusha looks at him with a very honest and sincere reply and says, I really do not understand why the Rebbe sent you to me, because I have never experienced anything bad in my life. And the chassid is looking at this guy like, he doesn't see what's going on around him. He's got nothing. He has nothing. He's in a leaky house. His kids are in tattered rags. He's a righteous man with nobody caring for him. How can he honestly say that? But he meant it. He truly meant it. So that's the ideal. That's what the Talmud is saying. We should be like Rabbi Zusha, where bad is not bad, bad is good, good is bad, bad is good. But how is that possible? So for those of you who have been following the Torah portions these last couple of weeks may have an idea. And that idea is we have to start with the concept, an idea that everything is from God. There's a lot of discussion today. I think there's a famous guy called Harold Kushner, whatever his name is, a guy who lost a son, unfortunately, and how he reacted to it. And he feels, of course, bad is not coming from God. A lot of people that feel like that. A lot of people feel that when bad things happen, it's not coming from God. It's nature. God gets involved in certain areas. But as we discovered in chapter 20 and 21, and if you study the rest of the Tanya, when we get to the last section, the second section of the Tanya, Shara Yichud V'Emunah, God is involved in creating every single aspect and element of the world at every single moment. The world is not an autopilot. If the world was autopilot, that can make sense. So autopilot world, sometimes bad things happen. God is deeply involved in every single aspect of the world at every single moment. And you might say, well, why would he care? The answer is he has the ability. He's infinite. He can care for everything at every single moment, every single detail. He's intricately involved in everybody's lives and the Talmud says that a bird cannot snatch a fish from the sea if God didn't ordain it. Okay, there's hundreds of birds. National Geographic follows these birds. This is like random birds. No, God is integrally involved in every single aspect of creation. He didn't leave it on autopilot. The world can't subsist on autopilot. I mean, of course, God could do anything if he wanted, but the way God created the world, it cannot subsist on autopilot. God is integrally involved in every single thing in this world, and therefore anything that happens to anybody at any given moment, at the very least, one has to believe God was involved in it and knew about it and chose not to stop it. But of course, there's much more than that. God is creating it every single moment. God is making it happen. So we believe that God is integrally involved in every single happenstance in this world. And with that being said, we also believe, this is our second belief. So again, our first belief is that God is involved in everything. Our second belief is that of course, that God is good, and this is a more interesting one. Oh wow, now we get to see real winter. Okay, so all right, we were freezing over here at 55-degree weather, but okay, I see. I can't complain. Okay, my brother is in Milwaukee. He told me it was 6 degrees there or something. Yeah. Okay. All right. So today you're going to learn how to be happy despite being cold. That's really what today's class is about. Okay. So the first priori, I don't know how to say it in English. The first yesod, the first foundation to understand, as we said, is that everything is in God's purvey. God is creating everything at every single moment. If anything is happening, it's God is doing it. Okay, that's the first belief we have to have. Now, the second belief is another interesting one. That is, we believe that God is good. It's also an important belief. There are those that believe that who said God is good. Right? Okay. I'm not going to go down the path. Just, of course, you should know there are those people that say such a thing. But if we believe, which we do, that God is integrally involved in every single thing happening in the world at every single moment, and we also believe that God is good, which means he's seeking to do good. He's not sadistic. He's not just trying to torture us. We believe everything he does is good. Then when anything happens to us, we understand automatically that everything that happens is godly, and therefore everything that happens is good. It's the logic. So again, if we believe these two foundations, foundation number one is that everything that happens in this world, every single detail of this world, is directly orchestrated by God, which again we discussed in chapter 20 and 21, and we will again discuss in the section of Tanya known as Shar HaYichud. And if we also believe that God is good, and good people do good things, so it's not like, human beings, right? Some of us might be good people, but sometimes we get really upset at people and we get very sadistic, okay? God is not like that, okay? He's good. He's always good. He's always trying to do the best for us. So if we believe those two things, then whenever anything happens to us, even if it's bad, even if our house is foreclosed on or whatever it is, it's good. It has to be good. That's what logic would tell us, because God was involved in what happened, and God is good, and God only does good. You might say, how so? So, first I'll bring you the story of Yosef. First I'll bring you the story, of course, of Yosef HaTzadik. Yosef HaTzadik, we had in the last couple of weeks, we had in the Torah portions. Joseph was sold into slavery, and he told his brothers that I am not upset at you for selling me. I always understood and understand that whatever happened to me was orchestrated by God, and look, it worked out. I can feed you during the famine. So Joseph was a man who lived this. If we look throughout the Torah, he never got depressed. So Joseph was a great example of this. We also have, there's two stories in the Talmud. One is of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was one time sitting outside of, he wanted to sleep in a town. He came too late. They used to lock the gates of the towns at night so robbers wouldn't break in. So they didn't let Rabbi Akiva in, and so he had to sleep outside for the night. And he had with him a donkey for travel. He had with him a rooster to wake him up, and he had with him a candle. So he wanted to study Torah. So first, a wind came and blew out the candle. Then forget, something killed his chicken, and then something killed his donkey. So he had nothing left. And then in the middle of the night, robbers broke into the town and robbed everybody. So then he understood everything was divinely ordained. The fact that he didn't get into the town is so he wouldn't be robbed. The fact that his candle went out and his rooster was eaten, his animal was eaten, was also that when these robbers would pass by the front gate, they wouldn't notice Rabbi Akiva because he was in the dark and quiet. So, when bad things happen, that is one option, but it's not the only option. In other words, I said earlier that surely based on our Jewish foundations, that everything that happens is from God, and everything that God does is good, that therefore everything that happens to us is good. So, but then you ask, how so? Well, one option is, as I presented in the above stories, that it's to bring to something good later. So in this case, Rabbi Akiva would be safe from the robbers, and Joseph so that he could feed his family, and he could become second in command. There are other reasons that could be. Another reason is that sometimes difficulties open up a new door. There's a famous story of the Baal Shem Tov. He one time showed up to someone's house, a very poor man, and he asked him for a high level of charity and cleaned this guy out. So this guy literally pawned off everything he had to give charity to the Baal Shem Tov. And all the students were looking at the Baal Shem Tov like, what's wrong with you? Well, not what's wrong with you. They didn't understand. Sorry, they didn't question. They just didn't understand. Big difference. They didn't question. They didn't understand. So later on, the Baal Shem Tov comes back a year later, and now this guy, this innkeeper they were at the year before, who was very poor, is now very wealthy. So they asked the Baal Shem Tov what happened. The Baal Shem Tov is very simple. He says the guy always had just enough money to get by, and he would never pray to God. He would never really pray to God, for help. And so finally, when I broke him, when I took all his money and he had nothing left, finally he was broken down and he started to pray to God, and that opened up the blessings that he was deserving. There were blessings that were waiting for him, but he needed to cry out to God. So sometimes bad things happen to us to open up a new door, to open up a new opportunity. Sometimes bad things might happen to cleanse our soul. Sometimes bad things might happen to awaken us to perfect our deeds. We don't actually know when something bad happens to us, why it happens. We are told these different options because it helps us deal with it, but that doesn't mean that when something happens to me, I know why it happened. Okay, so I'm not going to tell you when something bad happens to you, why it happened to you, and I won't either tell myself when something bad happens to me, why it's happening to me. But we do know, again, these are just ideas that we can wrap our head around that can help us wrap our heads around the idea that something bad is happening to me and it could be good. My point is that when something bad happens to us, we need to remember this. Again, our first reaction is, of course, going to be very difficult and it's going to be very hard to deal with. We need to remember that whatever is happening to us is coming from God, and whatever God does is good. This is, by the way, why when we, on New Year's, we wish people, what do we tell people? What's the wish we wish people on Rosh Hashanah? Not like 2025. What do we wish people on Rosh Hashanah? What's the blessing we give people? Anybody? What do we wish people?
Have a sweet new year.
Have a sweet new year, okay. And in Hebrew, what is it?
Lashana Tova, Tika Tevu.
Okay, Lashana Tova Umetuka. Yeah, Lashana Tova Umetuka. Let's have a sweet new year. Actually, in the Hebrew says, have a good, sweet new year. So the question is, why have a good, sweet new year? What's the point of that? The answer is that you can have a good year, but it won't be sweet. Because everything that God does is good. So if you just wish someone have a good year, and they could have a good year, but in the meantime, they lost all their money, and they lost, and their health is not good. They can have a good year without having a good year, So that's why we wish people Lashana Tova Umetuka. We wish people they should have a happy and sweet new year. Or a lot of times we say, the Rabbi would say this a lot, but it's a common phrase also. We tell people they should have Tov Hanira v'Hanigla. They should have revealed and seen good. It's a blessing we give people. We tell people not only I bless you with good, I bless you with revealed good. Or revealed blessings. Because it's possible that we have blessings in our lives, and it's possible we have goodness in our lives, but we don't see it. And so we pray to God, and we give blessings to others as well. That not only should they have good in their life, but they should have revealed good in their life. That's what we want for people. We want people to have not just good, but revealed good. Because as Jews, we understand that truthfully, everything that happens is good. Everything that we experience is good because everything is godly and everything is good. I don't understand how, but it is good. Now, let's take this a little bit further because the Alter Rebbe takes this a little bit deeper in a philosophical sense, and then this is a powerful idea. So he adds that we need to understand that when something bad happens to us and it's really good, the reason why we're not experiencing it is actually because it's a deeper level of good. It's a deeper level of good. That's why we're experiencing it. For example, the difference between parents and grandparents. Grandparents, when when they babysit the kids, they let the kids watch movies all day and they bring them to the beach and they buy them all treats and they give them candies. The parents, though, have a deeper level of love to their children, to their own children. They have a deeper level of love, and therefore, they give them discipline. The children don't appreciate discipline. They don't like discipline. But in truth, in the long term, that is a deeper level of love. It's a true level of care. It's really caring for the child by disciplining them and giving them structure and not giving them candies all the time and not spoiling them. And so the same thing says the Alter Rebbe, of course, based on Kabbalistic philosophy, is that sometimes we experience bad because it's actually a deeper level of good that cannot be revealed. In other words, sometimes the best things in life are the things that cannot come in a revealed way of good, right? So again, so the candy that a parent gives a child is a level of love, but the discipline they give them is a deeper level of love. But we're not up to understanding it, right? It's like a child would much more appreciate a chocolate candy, right? A chocolate coin than a real coin, even though the real coin is probably more valuable. So we're kind of like children in some ways. We cannot appreciate some of the deepest levels of good that God can give us. And therefore, they come into this world seemingly as the opposite of good. It's so good that we cannot handle, just as a child cannot comprehend some of the good that the parent gives to their children, we cannot always comprehend the good that God gives us. And the Alter Rebbe explains it in more Kabbalistic terms, talking about what's called Alma Desgasia and Alma Desgalia, the hidden worlds and the revealed worlds. There's something called the hidden worlds and the revealed worlds. And he doesn't explain it so much, but the hidden worlds are an even greater level of good than the revealed worlds. In Kabbalah, the example they actually give for the hidden worlds is like the ocean. The ocean, today we know a lot more what's going on in the ocean, but think of it, back in the day, people would see this vast body of water, and today we know there's so much more going on underneath in the ocean than there is on top of the earth. I mean, the ocean is much larger. There's so much more diverse and vast, and it's incredible what goes on there. But nobody sees it. It's there. It's hidden, but it's so much greater. And so there's some spiritual levels and worlds that are hidden from us, and we can only experience them in hidden ways. And what does hidden mean? Hidden means it comes to us in a bad way. So it's a fascinating thing. I guess what I'm trying to say is that well, actually, I should say what the Alter Rebbe is trying to say is he's trying to tell you that when you experience something bad, not only do we believe God is directing it, and not only do we believe it's good, but in many cases, it's probably actually a deeper level of good. You're actually experiencing, that's a whole other way of looking at it. You're experiencing something so good that you can't experience it. It's so powerful that you cannot comprehend it. There's a famous story that actually depicts this idea, going back to the story of Rabbi Zulshan and Rabbi Melech. The story was Rabbi Zulshan and Rabbi Melech, these two Hasidic brothers, two Hasidic masters. They were one time thrown in prison. They were falsely accused of stealing. They were thrown in prison. And when they were sitting there in prison, they wanted to pray. And one brother says to the other, He says, I want to pray, but I can't pray. Why? Because there's a chamber pot. You know, it's the prisons. They would put the chamber pot in there. He says there's a big chamber pot, and so I can't pray. You know? So the other brother said to him, what do you mean? The same God that tells us that when we have a clean room, we should pray is the same God that tells us when we have an unclean room, we're not allowed to pray. So just as you would dance when you would pray, let's dance when we can't pray. And so the two brothers, they started dancing around the chamber pot. They started dancing around the chamber pot that's in the room. That comes from a perspective. It comes from a perspective. It's the same idea. It's a perspective that just because I can't do what I want to do, right? He wanted to actually pray. But God is the one preventing me from praying. God is the one that is, that God is the one that's allowing me to listen to him as well by not praying. And so I'm happy about that. You know, we today, we love to plan, and we get on our equilibrium gets really thrown off when things don't go our way. And it's very hard to deal with. And so we need to really always remember when things are going good, is that remember, even the blessings that we're getting is not because we planned it, not because we decided, not because we were so smart. It's always a blessing from God. Everything that happens, every single moment is a blessing from God. It's hard to wake up. All right, thank you, Beth. A safe trip to the airport, and we'll see you later.
No, his dad is taking him. But anyway, thank you.
Oh, okay, all right.
Wonderful class as always.
Thank you. Okay, we'll send you the recording later.
Thank you.
So, you know, it's hard to actually wake up only when bad things happen and remind ourselves that God is in control. You know, so we have to kind of remind ourselves always, you know, when good happens or when bad happens, that it's always in the hands of God. That'll help make the transition easier. But again, to our point here, when something bad happens, it's not that we're denying that it looks bad. We're not denying that it looks bad. It does look bad. And it naturally should be sad. What we're saying is take a deeper look at what you're seeing. Take a deeper perspective. And it's not enough to just know it. This is the whole Tanya, right? Chabad is all about knowledge that brings to your emotions. This is something that needs to be worked on. These ideas are not just something that I can tell you, right? It's not something that you can just tell yourself once. The knowledge of this idea is not alone going to help. You have to contemplate about it, allow it to become part of your psyche. That's why I say you can't just wake up when bad things happen and expect that this meditation is going to help you, right? What you know what they have online? Do this one trick. Tanya is not about tricks. Tanya is about hard work. This is hard work. And so we need to constantly remind ourselves that everything is coming from God. We have to always work on it. That's why, by the way, the basis of the Chabad Chassidic philosophy, one of the most basic elements of Chabad Chassidic philosophy is the belief in divine providence. It's so integral that actually the section that speaks about divine providence, which is the second section of Tanya, the Alter Rebbe thought about putting it first. Because truly it's the basis of everything that we discuss in Chabad Chassidic philosophy. The belief that everything is in God's hand and that God runs the world is behind really everything that we're trying to do. You know, we're trying to connect to God that's involved in the world. So much is based on that idea. So it's important that we work on bringing that idea into our psyche. That's actually what a lot of Hasidic philosophy is about. You know, I've said a couple times, but I'll say it again. The Tanya is actually, though it is a book of Hasidic philosophy, it's actually almost a book of what Hasidic philosophy should do for you. Okay? Though it is Hasidic philosophy, but it's also almost a book telling you what Hasidic philosophy should be doing for you, what Judaism should be doing for you. It's like the guide. You know, a lot of people call it the manual of a person with a soul and a body, the Tanya. But then after you study the Tanya, you actually have to do the work. So the Tanya will give you the short meditation of contemplating the ideas, but it's a manual. You gotta expand it. You gotta, you know, expand your knowledge of God's involvement in the world and expand your knowledge of divine providence and all these different areas. Just remember, these are the basic ideas. Just because I'm teaching it to you here today doesn't mean automatically it's going to come to you automatically. You're going to be able to deal with difficulties and remind yourselves that everything is godly. That's something you need to work on day in and day out. That's what the study of Hasidic philosophy does for us, is that it helps us inculcate these ideas into our mind. So this is just a reminder, a PSA. Though we study the Tanya, and it does so much for us, the Tanya also is a reminder that we need to study more. You know, they tell the story, it's an anecdote, I don't know if it's really true, somebody came to his rabbi and says, Rabbi, I only have 5 minutes a day to study. Should I study Tanya or should I study Talmud? So that his rabbi told him you should study the Tanya, because if you study the Tanya, then you'll find out that you have more than 5 minutes a day to study. But that's the idea. The Tanya teaches us what we should be doing, but then we actually have to do the work. So back to our point here. Back to our point here is that we need to remind ourselves that when bad things happen, it's in truth a deeper level of good. And it's coming from what's called the hidden world. It's good that's so good that we cannot appreciate it, like the parent versus the grandparent. Let's take a look here. So the Alter Rabbi says, the reason why we should be happy, even when something bad happens, okay, again, we ask the question, how is it possible? I understand that Talmud says we should be happy when something bad happens, but how is it possible? So he says, the reason is because even this apparently bad occurrence is good too. But he says, but this fact is not clear. 1 second, why does this come here? Though this fact is not clear or discernible to our mortal eyes, the above represents normative rabbinic theology. Now, the Tanya adds an additional insight based on Kabbalah. This is a very interesting Kabbalistic insight. Let's turn over here. Because this apparent misfortune stems from the unmanifest world, which is above the manifest world. The higher unmanifest world contains a greater good, but one which cannot be appreciated by us here in the manifest world. You ought to accept seemingly unfortunate occurrences joyously amid the awareness that paradoxically they are an expression of a higher source. They are an expression of a higher source which is unable to express itself in the world as something positive. Just 1 second. Let me make sure someone's trying to get back in. Okay. They got back in. Okay. All right. They are an expression of a higher source which was unable to express itself in this world as something positive. The manifest world is represented by the last 2 letters of the Tetragrammaton Vavke, and the unmanifest world is represented by the first 2 letters of the Tetragrammaton Yudke. The 4 letters of God's name as the Tetragrammaton are subdivided by the Kabbalists into 2 groups, indicating that God could be experienced in 2 ways. The last 2 letters, Vav K, refer to God as he is experienced in the manifest world. The Vav, which is a vertical line, symbolizes a journey downwards from a unmanifest to manifest, and the Hey, which extends fully in both vertical and horizontal directions, represents the diverse polarization of the manifest world. So if you look at God's name, the Yud K Vav K, the first 2 letters, as he says here, Yud K, refer to God as he is unmanifest. This is expressed by the formless Yud, which typographically is a dot devoid of any polarity. Let me just go back to the previous page because there was an important Hasidic thought at the bottom. The manifest world is plagued by polarity. North only exists because of south, light because of dark, sweet because of bitterness, pleasure because of pain. You might like the idea of a life which is totally devoid of pain and only offers pleasure, but that actually is impossible because in the manifest world, the 2 experiences are interrelated. There are 2 ends of the same pole. If there was no pain, there would be no pleasure. In the unmanifest world, there's only one reality, essence, or you might simply call it being. It's just God himself, before he manifests the dualities that we are familiar with. When you shift your consciousness to be aligned with the unmanifest world, your priority is not whether you are feeling pain or pleasure. What matters is that you are experiencing God. Pain may be unpleasant, but ultimately it is an expression of God. The shift in consciousness necessary to align yourself with the unmanifest world would be impossible if you didn't have Chokhmah in your soul. Chokhmah gives you the ability to look beyond your immediate experiences and be totally open to something beyond. In this case, it enables you to look beyond your personal preference for pleasure over pain and focus on the transpersonal reality of being connected with the unmanifest world that's far more precious than anything the manifest world has to offer. Okay, so you need to shift your consciousness and to be aligned with a world where experiencing God is the most important. And so therefore, when you're experiencing bad, you're still experiencing God. So there's no difference. Now, let's see. And this is the meaning of the verse. Fortunate is the man whom you, O God, admonish. Where God's name in the verse is spelled with a Yud K signifying manifest. When you experience his pleasure, it can be harder to connect to God because your own enjoyment draws you away from God consciousness. Pain and admonishment, on the other hand, forces your consciousness towards the unmanifest and forget yourself a fortunate predicament. Interesting. So when you experience good, it's very easy to forget about God. But if you're someone that can experience God in the bad, then you're not likely to be distracted. Because there's no, you're not going to get lost in yourself. You're not going to get lost in yourself. The Tanya is going to say something here. It's going to add that really what the Tanya is doing here, just to explain. What the Tanya doing here is taking it a step further than we said earlier. Earlier we said that when we experience bad, when we experience bad in our lives, remember that it's all divinely ordained and it's really good. Now he's adding on why we should be happy. The reason why we should be happy is if our whole mission in life is to feel closeness to God, that's what makes us happy, then when bad things happen and we know now we're experiencing a deeper closeness to God, then I surely can be happy. If my joy in life is whether I am enjoying it, in other words, whether the chocolate cake tastes good or whether the money means I can buy the stuff that I want, if that's what my enjoyment in life is, then sure, when bad things happen, I'm unlikely to be happy. But if the reason why I enjoy life when it happens is because, if the reason why I enjoy life when it happens is because of the closeness of God that I feel, then when bad things happen, I can feel close to God as well. That's really his takeaway over here, is that if your life's joy comes from closeness to God, then you could be happy with bad things as well. How many of us get our life joy from being close to God? Well, that's something we have to work on. But that's how the Talmud says you should be happy over the bad just as good. Because if I just understand everything God does is good, but I don't appreciate being close to God, all right, I might not be so happy, right? So if I'm being punished for my sins and being cleansed of my sins, I'm still not happy, okay? You're happy. The reason why you can be very happy is because you feel close to God. And now the Alter is going to add, if you're actually happy when bad things happen, it actually will lead you to a lightening of the bad things happening. It's a very interesting thing. Let's take a look. Therefore, our sages of blessed memory taught that those who love him are like the sun going out in its strength. Refers to those who happily accept suffering. The verse in Judges cites the Talmud is at first glance elusive. What does happily accept suffering have to do with the sun going out in its strength? And how is it connected with the experience of love? So he explains, because this happy acceptance of suffering comes from a love of closeness to God that surpasses anything in this world, as the verse states. For experiencing your kindness is better than worldly life. And if closeness with God is what matters to you, then it is to be found with more dignity and a immeasurably greater extent in the unmanifest world. The word dignity is interesting, but his point is that when bad things happen, you can experience God more. The unmanifest precedes the manifest and transcends it. If you want to be closer to God, then you would prefer a connection with the unmanifest, even if it is painful. For in the unmanifest world, there his strength is hidden, and he sits in secrecy on high. His presence is more powerful, and that's why we don't experience it as actual good. So his point is, this is why, through happily accepting suffering, you will merit to experience in the future the sun going out in its strength, which refers to the sun emerging from its protective filter, which screens the sun in this world, whereas in the future, the sun will appear out of its filter, right? So we know today the sun has, I think we have an ozone layer, there's other things that protect the sun from truly damaging this world. So to speak, the sun is shielded from the world in today. So the Torah uses this as an example that to an extent, just as the sun is not fully revealed, God is not fully manifest. But when Mashiach comes, so to speak, the sun will be revealed, God himself will be fully revealed. And when that happens, those who experienced God before will be lucky enough to fully experience God. And it says those who did not experience God before will get burnt. But the point is that if you become happy with the bad that happens, you will experience greater goodness when Mashiach comes. And I want to add something the Alter Rabbi writes elsewhere. Not only that, but even now, even before Mashiach comes, if God sees that you are happy to the closeness with him from the bad that happens to you, he will actually lighten the judgments and the difficulties that you are experiencing. So that's just an important thing to know. Let's continue. In other words, the removal of the sun from its filter is a metaphor for disclosure of the unmanifest world, right? Just as the sun is not fully revealing itself, it's got the ozone layer, whatever it is, and in the future it will be fully revealed. Similarly, the unmanifest world, which is not revealed now, but when Mashiach comes, it will be fully revealed. And when Mashiach comes, the unmanifest world will be able to be revealed in this world. And when it can be revealed in this world, it will be only good. Let's continue. The presently unmanifest will then shine and illuminate profusely and intensely to all those who took refuge in it in the current era, who had previously aligned themselves with a consciousness of the unmanifest by happily accepting suffering. And this experience will be accessible, will be only possible for those who retreat in his shade now in the current era. They find God even in the darkness. The shadow of Chokhmah, finding God in the shadow of suffering, is made possible by using your Chokhmah as experience, which allows you to connect with God's Chokhmah as an unmanifest world, the Tetragrammaton. So I read quickly through a lot of the text here because I believe I explained it all outside, referring to the unmanifest quality of the shade as opposed to the manifest light of avert goodness. Again, so now we're experiencing the good of the shade. In the future, we'll experience the good of the sun. Let's just take a look here at the practical lesson. Even misfortunes in financial, health, or family matters will not make you sad when understanding they come from God. You do not resist them and accept them willingly. Suffering, in fact, connects you to God more deeply as it rips through directly to the unmanifest world. So, in conclusion, then I'm going to show a video. And I also want to point out to this beautiful link here that everybody should read this story. You should copy it now. It's a very worth it link to read. It's a great story. Okay, in conclusion, bad things can happen to us. And of course, it's only natural to feel sad. And the Tanya here gives some advice of how to look at when bad things happen. Once we understand that everything comes from God, everything in this world is divinely ordained by God, and God is good, we understand that when something bad happens to us is good. And once we look at the Kabbalistic view of it, not only is it good, it's actually the deeper level of good that could not come revealed to us in a normal way. That's why it's coming to us in a bad way. But in truth, it's actually a deeper level of good. And if I value closeness to God, then I will be so happy that God has chosen to be so nice to me as to make my life difficult. Okay? And I don't have to look at it as difficult. I can look at it as closeness to God. That's the difference. I'm not looking at it as it's all godly, right? You ever hear people say it's all godly? What does it matter, right? I'm rich, I'm poor. What does it matter? That's a perspective that it's all godly. And when we feel difficulties, it's a deeper level of closeness of God. And and when we can reach that level of understanding and feel it, we can choose to be happy even in difficulties. Now, I want to share this video. It's a presentation of again from the Rabbi in a video. It's not just the Rabbi talking; it's people's stories. What's so interesting about the story, and I gotta find. It's not this one. It's this one over here. What's so fascinating about this video is usually when when people hear Hasidic stories and stories of the Rebbe, you imagine they all have to have good endings, right? Everything always works out. And what I want to show you in this video is that here are instances where people had difficulties, and they were difficult, and the Rebbe had them try to find the happiness in the hardship. And that's really what today's about. It's not about getting rid of the hardship. It's about finding happiness within the hardship. Of course, there's a place before bad things happen to think good, and it will be good. But it doesn't always turn out that way. And so in those cases, we need to find happiness in the hardships. Let's see this video.
In der Igrischer Rambam ist da ein Jigeres, was beschreibt sein Leben, sein Seder Ayem und sein Seder Achayim. Seht man als Bepele noch nicht gewähnt, als Mensch Abal Yisurim. Afal Pikein, kommt zu der Maskone mehr in der Woche und sagt, das ist der Schkoffe. Von Aiden, der Schkoffe von Tera, als diese Aiden, was man darf gucken auf der Welt bei ein Teva, mit der Tikwa-Teva, mit der Bitochen, Chosek, Vechuli, wäre dort meirig, bekam er die Zeus, was kommen Reis von der Hanoch.
I'm considering running for the United States Congress in Florida. In 1989, I was running for Congress, something that had been a dream for a long time.
It was a big financial undertaking. He had sold a business. He was hiring people, and he was He wasn't working, so we were going more and more in depth. We were young and didn't realize the impact of it.
I had no idea how really awful politics can be in terms of everything's reduced to bumper stickers, talk, bumper sticker language, nasty tactics. It was a rough going. I learned a lot through it. I did not win. We went up to my family's home up in the Berkshires, licking my wounds from a campaign.
Just needed to just be away from everything. He didn't have a job, and he lost a lot of money, and he was at a really, really, really down time. All of a sudden, he gets a call from Rabbi Groner.
The Rabbi said that I should not be downtrodden, I should be happy. Although I didn't win, it was still a bracha, and that I would be able to go on to make other contributions.
His entire demeanor, his entire way of thinking was different. Was different after it.
Al derech wie das ist bei Chayev HaProtim shel HaPesach, HaMeire Nevuchim, al derech sei das bei Chayev von Kol Am Yisrael. Sagt mir na Yiden a Zivui, Iv das Hashem besimcha. Und noch in derselbe Teira, wo das ist a Heroe, sagt mir na wenn is a Yid Eved Hashem, I das bechol drachecha doehu. Das ist a 24 Shoah Misles, is Eved Hashem, darf stehen in der Tnur von Simcha.
In 1956, my father had this building in Montreal. The ground floor of the building was his business, was the store, and the upper floors, the 2 floors, were rented out to small manufacturers. It was an 80-year-old building, and the insurance company told us that they were canceling the insurance. He didn't know how to deal with it. Everything was all in inventory. The inventory was flammable and everything could go at any time. He didn't feel he had the wherewithal to come up with enough money to tear it down and rebuild. He became very depressed. He came to New York with the plans for the building, and I joined to visit the Rebbe. My father was up at the desk with his hands flat on the desk, and he was bent over, and that's really how he had been for a couple of months, kind of bent over and depressed. The Rebbe said, "Reb Nosson, stand up straight." My father took his hands off the desk and he stood up straight, and then he told him that he has to be besimcha, and he has to be like a soldier who goes out to battle and doesn't know what's going to be, but he has the emunah that he's going to win. That's how you have to go back to Montreal and into your bank, to your bank manager, to the mortgage company, with full confidence that the Rebbeinu Shalom is on your side, and you're gonna be able to pull it off.
Konne sich bei sich werden erschrockener und herangefallener, was hat für ein Schliches. Was wird das konne mit Malle sein, sagten nee, soll's wissen sein, dass mehr nicht bei die, was haben mehr nicht wie eine Bosse. Der aber, was sind in der eine Bosse, ist jeder guckt auf Welt. Is beim Sumore Menechem hebt auf früher der eine Bosser seine und geht guck auf den Himmel. Und demut der Zetter Ruyu mi bore Eile wird beschaffen unter die Welt tegen. Und unter demut habt sagt, dass ist eine Welt, wo das Pardes und der Gani, wie genuni Shela Kodesh Baruch Hu.
ההורים שלי נכנסו לרבי. אמא שלי נכנסת ובוכה לרבי. wenn Bauch hat auch mit dem Maschinen schmier. Will nicht gehen mit dem Maschinen. Hört nicht. Und will, dass der Rebbe soll גם הברוכה, זה עולה mehr. הרבי אמר לאמא שלי, tot, אתה רוגל mit dem Maschinen, weil schämte, verstehe ich. Dein Bauer, dein Mamschich, dein Kein mit dem Machschirm. Und wird nicht sternen, Schidduchim. Und dein Besimach und Tuf Levov. אחר כך, אמא שלי אמרה לרבי, אני הורדתי את המכשיר, אני רציתי שהרבי ייתן פרופט שאני אשמע. קיוויתי שאני אשמע, שהרבי יברך ויפעול למעלה, שאני אשמע. כשהם יצאו, הכנסתי לרבי. הבאתי לרבי את הפתק. והוא אומר לי תוך כדי קריאה, ת"ז, בשמחו בטוב לבוב, והרבי ירים את העיניים. ושואל אותי, Du hörst mir, ja, אמרתי לרבי, יחן. הרבי אמר לי, אתה ממשיך sein kein mit dem Machschirm. Und du wirst sein Besimcha b'tov levov. Und du wirst sein kein, du zurückgefangen nach Israel. Und du wirst lernen, morgen Kiddushin. את פרק deine חברים, את רד mit den חברים. Und komm mal Kirche mit dem Ebenbesten. Und du wirst מצליח sein. Und sagt dem Rabbi, aber ich will aber jetzt zu lernen gut. Der Rabbi hat gesagt, dann sein Besimchen. Und du wirst מצליח sein.
Was Hastere sagt als darf sein so mehr, ist Simen, als hat von was zu sein so mehr. Weil mit dem beim nicht monen kein Sach, weil das nicht genommen ist, das Heper von Teresem. Und das hat wie von Teresem.
כשיצאתי מהיחידס, הרגשתי שהרבי נתן לי כזה דחיפה שצריך להיות בשמחה. שברוך השם התחתנתי, הקמתי בית נאמן בישראל, ילדים פריים ושלמים, חיתנתי כמה ילדים. זה המסר שאני אומר, להיות בשמחה, וברגע שתהיה בשמחה, אתה תצליח.
He walked out of there a different person. The Rebbe just changed him from being despondent and worried to being confident. In fact, he shortly after managed to get the mortgage and managed to get it at a very good rate, and he did the building.
After the Rebbe's call, we moved to Maryland, and he got a presidential appointment with President Bush.
I was a senior diplomat and VP of the U.S. International Development Corporation. The impact of the Rebbe's message to me was that we all try to write our own book of what we want our life to look like. But God has a much better book in mind.
Bisher wird durchgenommen mit dem Gedanke, mit der Haschkofe al Pitera. Dem wird der Be'er Pnei Melech Chai. Und lernt Teiro mis Mekaye Mitzvahs Yitech Archova v'Arvocho Kipshutom. Begashmiyus.
Powerful stuff. Oh, wait, gotta close that. Powerful stuff. And hope you all learned from that, as I did. And that's really the theme. We can't always write exactly how we want it to be and demand that things go the way we want, but we need to be joyous and good things happen. And we can live a good and fulfilled life. Shkoch, thank you all for coming. And I'm going to stop the recording, and we'll see you all next week. Also, next week, Wednesday night, we're starting the class on decoding the Talmud, discovering the deeper meaning of the Talmud. So I hope you all join us for that as well.